Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and on behalf of the Chemical and Process Division of Engineers, I'm delighted to welcome you to our first event of 2022-2023, which is great to have in person after all the COVID restrictions we've had over the last couple of years. My name is Donald O'Callaghan. It's a great pleasure to introduce David Florence, who's Managing Director of Gray Integrated Services of Europe, who will give us a presentation titled Establishment of a Turnkey Beverages Facility in Ireland, as you see there on the screen. Now, we also have people that we're streaming to. I think it's about half a dozen people, so I'd like to welcome them as well. Dave is an architect. Now, we won't hold that against him, who graduated from the University of Kentucky. I first met Dave in, I think it was November 2019, in an office in the John Paul office in Dundrum. And we both came in and we looked a bit, Project Moher? Project Moher? I said, what is Project Moher? Now, the only Moher I knew was the Cliffs of Moher. But apparently, as you all know, when projects happen of this size, they're always given I guess, a code name. But we were Project Moher, which anyway. So we gradually got to know one another, and little did I know that it was the start of a collaboration between both our companies, which culminated in the successful completion of this facility, which Dave's now going to tell you about. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to Dave, who will introduce himself, Gray, and the project in more detail. But just before I do, just a few housekeeping things. Emergency exits. There you go. Phones on silent. And just at the very end, my colleague here, Mark McCarthy, Vice Chair of the division, is going to facilitate the Q&A at the end. So, Martin, you'll be nice to all the questioners. And that's it. So, over to you, Dave. Okay.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you, everybody, for giving up your evening tonight to come listen to an exciting topic that I'm going to share on. So it was codename Project Mower, and then we went to a more exotic code name, which was Project ABC, which is pretty impressive, when you think about what it could have been codenamed. So it's on the establishment of the Turnkey Beverages facility. I'm Dave Florence. The agenda for tonight is going to be pretty straightforward. One moment, please. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so a little bit about me, a bit about Gray, modernizing a 50-year-old design and what that looked like and what that entailed. The collaborative design development that we had to go through to make the project successful, some of the differences that we ran into between the Irish delivery standards and practices and what we're used to, and then ultimately that relationships were key for the success of the project. So as we start off, I'm going to be humble pie here in regards to about me. So I always like to know something about the person that's doing the presentation just to kind of understand their background. So as you can tell from my accent, probably, I am from Kentucky. I'm not from Ireland. So I'm originally born and raised in Kentucky, which is in the States. And my lineage is tobacco. So that's the picture to the upper left there. I was raised on a tobacco family. I grew up on Legos and Lincoln Logs and erector sets. So that was what I did as a kid. I'm not an engineer. I am an architect. I think there might be some architects listening in, so I'm not going to disparage them or myself, but I feel like I'm in pretty heady crowd here with all the engineers and the smart folks in the room. The Bluebird there, the one with the H, that's the high school that I went to. That was the Mighty Bluebirds. I was on the debate team. I went to the University of Kentucky. The picture in the middle with the guys holding up the trophy, that's me holding up the #1. I ran cross country in high school and we won state that day. You'll see, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Frank Lloyd Wright, but he was my hero when I was in architecture school. Falling Water is the picture down below it. The Duomo in Milan is one of my favorite buildings to have ever been able to experience. You'll see the report card F there. That is in regards to my math scores. I failed horribly anything with math or structures. So that's why you see a picture of falling buildings. I am not a structural engineer, and really I'm not even an architect anymore, but that's kind of what I did. To the left is a little vase that's got marathon runners on it. I have run marathons. The picture of Ghost Rider. What I always wanted to be as a kid was a comic book artist. I thought that would have been the greatest thing ever. Ghost Rider was my favorite comic book. So there you go. Okay, lower left. You can't see it because I made it really small because I might be a little embarrassed about it. I'm not sure. Far left is The Sound of Music. I was in The Sound of Music. Thank you very much. The middle picture is Top Gun, one of my favorite movies of all time. I like the second one that came out as well. And then to the right of that is Mamma Mia. I don't know if you all know Mamma Mia, my favorite musical of all time. So just to give you a full spectrum of who I am and what I'm about. Lower right, that's my beautiful family. So my lovely wife, my 4 kids, all grown and out of the house. So I am managing director of Gray Integrated Services of Europe. I've been with Gray almost 25 years. I started in the design department, moved into project management, opened up offices across the U.S., started a department, pre-construction systems and services, it's called, and then moved over here about 3 years ago. So in 2019 is when we first came over. We moved in February of 2020. Convinced my wife that it would be great for her to move to Ireland. It would be awesome. She would love it. It would be a fantastic European experience. And then in March, they shut the country down. So we couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything. And so that was fun. So, okay, so that's me. I'll try to zip through that. Now, who is Gray? So Gray is a 60-year-old company, and we're built on our core values. So our number one core value is we put safety and quality of life first. Second one is we're customer and relationship driven. Third is we treat others the way we want to be treated. So down home, Kentucky, rural kind of philosophy. We're family owned. And you see our purpose statement. It's to make a difference in people's lives by creating unforgettable experiences. So that's what we're about. That's how we're wired, right? It's all about relationships. And so in the slide, in the presentations at the end, you'll see when I talk about relationships are key. The only way we were successful in this project was because we were able to maintain and establish good relationships built on trust, built on transparency, and just great teamwork that everybody contributed to the project on. Okay, so Gray specifically. So we are family owned. We're 60 years old. We're an integrated design build firm. So what that means to us in the States is we have in-house architecture, we have in-house civil engineering, mechanical, electrical, and then project management, construction management as a part of our offering. Over the years, we cut our teeth originally on industrial. So we were a small town contractor in Western Kentucky in the early 60s. Mr. Gray's first project was a tobacco barn, back to the tobacco. And then in the mid 80s, Toyota came to Kentucky to build their first OEM facility. And we were one of the 7 contractors able to build that project. One of the Grays, it's 4 brothers, the Grays, that run the company. And Franklin Gray is an architect. So that's when we brought in architecture into the service offering that we do. We are part of the founding members of the Design Build Institute of America back in 1986, I think it was. And so then we've just grown and grown and grown. So really industrial manufacturing is what our focus is on. We've carried manufacturing on the automotive side all across the Southeast, from East Coast to Texas. And then as the automotive market began to decline, we moved into the food and beverage side of the business. So that's when we really started to move into food and bev. And that's when we really started to grow on our engineering side. So we acquired several process engineering firms, mechanical and electrical firms, and started to build out that portfolio. We also now have equipment fabrication companies within the Gray Inc. family of companies as well, so that are specific on food production. Core markets you see: manufacturing, distribution, automotive, and then expansions. We do have as of now, we have over 2,000 employees spread out across all of that. That includes automation and controls engineering as well. So we spun that off internally, and then we acquired a company as well. So we have about 350 folks that are automation and controls engineers. So we handle the full gambit. You see 3 billion global revenue, and that does cover from planning, development, engineering, design, construction, digital, and equipment. So what we are is a fully integrated provider. So on this project specifically, we were handed the contract to provide the entire project from soup to nuts. So in terms of the process engineering, a conceptual design was done. We took that conceptual design. We then went back and validated against the existing operations in the US, and then just completely built it out from there. So all the process engineering, mechanical, electrical, we didn't do all of that. We partnered with a lot of folks as well, but we were responsible for all of it. equipment procurement. So we issued all the purchase orders on the equipment, as well as the installation of the equipment and the automation and controls and the commissioning and startup. So one-stop shop. Okay, so that's gray. Okay, so then the project specifically. Now, due to confidentiality, I can't show all kinds of pictures and all kinds of interiors, which I really want to do because it's a great looking facility and it really shows great. But we'll talk about some of the general concepts. So again, when we talk about modernizing the 50-year-old design, what we did was, as a single source responsibility, we partnered with a lot of local folks as well as provided a lot of those services as well. And I see several of our friends and team members that are here in the audience with us this evening. But again, we had to go back and we had to baseline the existing operations, and we had to modernize that to a current solution. So the process that they had was a very manual process. It involved a lot of tanks, a lot of manual movements. There wasn't much automation on it at all. And it was a facility that had been cobbled together over multiple years. So it wasn't an efficient design either. So then we had to take that process and packaging. We had to blend that with the civil structural, obviously build on top of that with the mechanical, electrical, bring in the automation and control. So that was a system that we started from scratch. Now this customer, we say customer, not client, but this customer for us, we had worked for 10 or 15 years. And so we had done a lot of work with them previously. We understood their automation systems. We understood their SAP delivery models. So we were able to take those designs and continue to build it out. We were currently doing a project for them in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is about a 1 million square foot facility. Same turnkey solution that we were doing on that project. And then you see the sourcing of the equipment, construction management, and the commissioning and startup. So that was the services that we provided. And so what they did was they acquired an existing building. And they came over and did a site search. They looked at greenfield facilities, they looked at brownfield facilities, and they ultimately settled on an existing Lidl distribution center. So Lidl had just moved out of the distribution center. Actually, we're still moving out of the distribution center because they had just built a brand new one just right down the street from where this facility was. So we came in and we looked at the existing building and we decided, okay, how can we take that and modify it to a modern, state-of-the-art, fully advanced, fully automated type of facility. And it required a lot of functional areas that we had to take into account. So because of some of the ingredients that are there and the hazard classifications of those ingredients, we had to look at how we were storing those ingredients, how we were moving those ingredients through the facility, the blending operations. So you can see the key process, the blending, the emulsion, the extraction, and the filling. So those are just a snippet of some of the unit ops. But we had to take that footprint and then modify it into a warehouse, a fully functional blending process areas. The SIP kitchen had to be developed and then move that into the process and packaging. And we had to do it concurrent with the permissions process that was going on, as well as try to meet their target end date of when they needed to get finished product out the door. So there were several constraints that we were working against concurrently as we were taking a design. The conceptual design actually took the entire building into consideration, but it didn't meet the budget requirements on the project. So what we had to do was re-engineer the conceptual design to try to fit from a budget standpoint as well as from a physical footprint standpoint. We had to look at all of the products that are being developed out of here, and by an automated system, how many ingredients and how many whips could we produce concurrently with each other based on their different packaging lines that they have. So they have multiple packaging volumes that they produce in multiple different types of containers. So we had to be able to produce the whips on the cycle within the sequence from the SAP ingredient delivery model to be able to get into the packaging line. So in terms of the unit ops, you see the different ones that are there, the pumping, the routing, the mixing, the shear mixing, homogenization, filtration. So some of this we had to look at their existing processes, again, which were very manual, and they had a series of continuums. They would do one process, then come back to a second process, come back to a third process as they were moving that through. So we had to look at the current technologies that were out in the marketplace to say, okay, what could we do from a homogenation standpoint that we could get that product or that whip through quicker so that they weren't having to let it sit in a hold tank or in a settling tank but what could we do to continue to push it through? So one of the solutions that we came up with was on this automated process. So you'll see we have 30 valve matrices and over 1,500 automated valves with a centralized control system. So that was crazy in my humble technical phrase there. Imagine a bowl of spaghetti that's just dumped onto a plate and trying to figure out the routing and the mapping of that and the interlocks associated with that. It was crazy. And then we had to understand the project was broken down into a phase A and a phase B. Phase A was based on their prime product, and phase B were based on the balance of whips that needed to come out of the facility. So they had to hit targets of this specific product has to come out on this date at this volume. So in order to be able to do that, we had to take their current process from their existing facility, and we had to hit the target on day one. And so what that means is we had to get some ingredients, special ingredients, delivered over from the States, the magic secret recipe stuff, shipped over to be able to make the final whip. And then we did that for a period of time until those process rooms were brought on board, to be able to ship the final products out. The other thing that was interesting was all test batches had to be sellable product. So when we did the first whip, it had to meet spec. There was no opportunity for us to miss spec because of the cost associated with the value of the ingredients that were being produced or put into the product, as well as what was being produced at the end of the product. So my friend Chad is in the audience right now, and he always answers this question. So it was point what that we hit the closeness to?
It was one within 1,000th on density the first time, the first commissioning went on high yield acid.
Yeah.
So it was 1,000th of basically it was like 1,000th of a point in the density when they took it to the lab.
Yeah, so it was awesome. So it was probably 11 o'clock midnight that night. We produced, they went into the special kitchen, they mixed, and we drank, and it was on point. So very first batch. So I breathed a huge sigh of relief, because as a part of what our service offering is as well is, we will take on the performance guarantees. And so there were a lot of strong penalties associated with if we missed a date. So we were able to hit target on that first one. But in regards to what it looked like, to go from the old distribution center to a new processing facility was pretty amazing. Now I can only show exterior photos, so I can't show any interior photos, so I apologize for that. But the picture on the upper left, that was the existing facility. So that was the existing Lidl building. So you'll see a difference in the roof colors there, a dark gray and then kind of a whitish or light gray color. The dark gray is the half of the building that we took over and converted into the facility. What you see on that picture as well in the front of it is the office bank. So that's the linear horizontal lines, existing office bank. But then still staying on that same picture, you'll see the new tank farm. And then on the back left, you'll see the new fire system that we had to put in. Obviously, the middle picture reflects the wastewater treatment. So with buying in an existing facility, it didn't have sprinklers, it didn't have wastewater treatment, it didn't have underground drainage. So we had to come in and basically replace all of that, or actually install all of it for new. So you'll see the middle picture there is all the slabs that have been removed from the existing facility, and then the new process drains that were installed to go under that. And it was just a hodgepodge of new drains that had to go in that we had to coordinate within the process layouts as well. Picture on the left is the lower picture on the left shows the warehouse with the racking system in it. Picture on the lower right references the tank installation. So because it was an existing facility, we had to come in and stage and sequence the construction activities. We had to break the process down between the phase A and the phase B of what we were installing and how we were installing it. So there was a lot of gnashing of teeth. There was a lot of late nights. There was a lot of cussing. There was a lot that was going on to be able to get all of these pieces and parts to be able to fit. I learned a lot about the type of lifts that are done here, the type of equipment that is utilized here, means and methods that are done here that are different than how we would have done it stateside. But kudos to the team that put this together and figured it out and worked it all out. And then you'll see the bulk tank ingredient farm there on the upper right picture. So again, those are ingredients that come in. You'll see the concrete wall that separates due to explosion requirements because of the volatility of the material that's stored in that tank as well. So again, to take that from what it was to what it is, it really drove the need for a collaborative design environment. And so what we've tried to represent here is what Gray provided on the US side and how we partnered on the engineering Ireland side. So the folks in green on the right are the key members that really influenced how we were able to deliver the project. So Tom Phillips and Associates from the perspective of the permissions process, because in the States, we can get to a permit super quick. Here, it's just not that easy to do. So that was quite a learning curve that we worked through, but to everybody's credit that was on the team, everybody, rowed in the same direction and understood what we were trying to achieve and how we were moving forward with that. You'll see Callahan Engineering. They definitely came to the table prepared to meet our needs, and they were able to step up on the mechanical and on the electrical side and the process support side. TOT Architects was brought in on the project. They actually designed the original building. So we felt as though there was a lot of learnings there that they had inherently with the project that they could bring forward. They worked with JB Berry and Partners on the civil side, structural side. So we had to reinforce the entire roof because of the loads that we were carrying on the roof load. We had to replace all the slabs. We had to put in equipment foundations, the tank farm. And so JB Berry worked through that. ORS supported us from a DAC and fire review process. Ampermec came in towards the end on the electrical side and supported us there, as well as some of the commissioning. Because the project was delivered during COVID, a lot of the folks and team members that were initially going to come from the US side to support us in Ireland were unable to do so due to backlog of work permits or whatever it was. So that also influenced us to find local partners that could support us. So Tamaki Controls was able to really support us on the automation and control side as we were looking to install it. John Paul Construction, I can't say enough about John Paul Construction. They were a phenomenal partner and friend on the project, and they supported the project dramatically and tremendously. My friends at Leo Lynch did an amazing job. So all of the work that was done on the process side, Kirby's on the building services side, STS from the electrical side, Rytec on the fire protection side, and then obviously Hydro from the wastewater treatment. So it wasn't just a Gray effort, it was a team effort. And you'll see what we did one column to the next column. So when you look at the Gray engineering perspective, what we did is we started out with the baseline, developed out the mass balance, the PFDs, the PNIDs initially. I learned a lot about step files on this project because BIM modeling was absolutely the only way we could have delivered this project. And John Paul took on the BIM coordination, and Leo Lynch really had a lot of engagement with that. But it also involved a lot of our process equipment vendors providing us the information that we needed in a timely manner. So that was a great process to go through. And then the sequence of operations, the SIP design, all those type of things. So that was all US based. And then we do have our food and beverage group on the US side that TOT, great architects, and we wanted to couple them with our food and beverage folks from a hygienic standpoint, a food defense standpoint, to make sure that there was coordination between those two teams. So you'll see what our group on the US side did in regards to that. And then on the automation and control side, like I said, so the system architecture, the commonality between all of the subsystems that were being developed from all the different process vendors, as well as the HMI screen development. We call it SCADA Plus. So to connect to the customer's SAP system, to be able to connect to their order system, to then move into how the facility would actually be run and operated. So it was interesting, the SAP engagement, because we were basically running test product as final sellable product. They had to have actual orders in the SAP system. And so when we were logging material out of inventory, it was actually coming out of their SAP system. So the coordination that had to be done to ensure that the orders were correctly entered into SAP that there was a true order that was running through the system, and that the product that was coming out was meeting all the quality specs per the SAP requirements was tremendous. But then when you look at the Ireland engineering and how we partnered and the collaboration that was required, you can see how it continued to develop out. So on the process completion, the piping design. So our team basically said, okay, here's our P&IDs, but really we need those normalized and localized. And so that was done here. And not only that, it was the routing associated with that as well. So the team came together and really worked through what's the best routing, what's the best support system, how do we drive that. The ATEX and the HAZOP, that was quite an activity that was required. The coordination regarding that, and I'll talk about that on a lessons learned slide, but that's where what we do stateside versus what's done here became really important on how we connected those dots and we built that bridge across. And thankfully, we had excellent partners here that were able to help lead us in that. The CE certification, you'll see later that we acquired or we procured process equipment from all across the world, really, from Europe and the US and from Canada. So some products had CE marking, some did not. So we had to go through the CE certification. And not only that, once the equipment was brought into the unit op or into the full line, then we had to get the full line CE certified. So the engagement that was needed to be able to do that was quite extensive as well. Loop diagrams, the BIM management, like I said, all of that was completed here on this side. All of the existing building modifications, we worked through the adjacencies. We saying Gray US, worked through the adjacencies, worked through the hygienic requirements and things of that nature. But really that was coordinated with TOT and what they were doing here. All the building services as well were completed here. We did the utility mass from a broad standpoint. Callahan took that and really completed that out and delivered it through. Wastewater treatment was completely handled here. We had the basis of design from the States, from the existing facility, but then there's new applications that are being applied here in terms of volumes and in terms of the different technologies that were being used, as well as some of the waste filtration that was being done. So that had to be brought into the wastewater treatment design as well. And then ultimately the automation and controls. So HMI final screen development and then the IO management was handled here as well. So again, it just goes to show the collaborative design effort that actually had to happen. We would not have been successful in the project. The project would not have been successful without that. And then when you talk about the team in terms of the process equipment, you can see the different vendors that we have identified here and where they came from across the different locations. So we did go through a tender process. We did go through, obviously recommendations. The customer had certain vendors and suppliers that they wanted to work with. We brought new suppliers in, and then obviously there were suppliers here local that really were able to perform in a fantastic way. So really, and everybody is equal here, but when you look at Pro Stainless and DC Fab and BCD, those folks were really, everybody was strong, but those folks were really strong in regards to helping us with, finalizing the process structures, finalizing some of the detailing that went on, the tanks, the inspections that were required, the SAT that had to go on. So a great effort from everybody involved in regards to that. And then when you talk about the differences, so for us, process engineering is agnostic. So I think hopefully everybody understands what I mean by that, but it pretty much travels pretty well across the globe. So whether it's a mass balance or adjacencies or P&IDs, process instructions, sequence of operations, that's all kind of site neutral, right? And so it carries really well. But then obviously you have to localize it. So what are the local impacts that come into play? So for us, what we encountered was really the ATEX drove a lot of design modifications, a lot of considerations that where we work with a national electrical code in the States. So you have a class and a division type of structure. Here it's obviously the ATEX. And so that's not always a one-to-one type of comparison. And that gets down, you all know better than I do, but it gets down into the instrumentation requirements upon in each of the pieces of equipment. So that level of scrutiny that was required was really a learning curve for us as well. And then in terms of the operations of the space itself. So, everybody knows the cone, the bubble, the whatever it is, but at how far out does that classification go. So there was a lot of conversation back and forth of, is it a meter? Is it 3 meters? Is it 6 meters? Is it this sphere of influence, or does it go all the way to that wall? Does it go all the way up to the ceiling? You know, where can we stop and start? And that was something that, you know, the customer did not have to deal with in the States. And so it was a completely new learning curve that they had to go through. And we had to walk them through that process. When I say we, that's the collective team, we, not just Gray. So there was a lot of work around that. And then the hazardous area classification as well, obviously was driven by that too. So what made it complicated was the project became an operating facility halfway through the project. So because it was a phase A and a phase B, the project flipped from a construction site to a manufacturing site halfway through. And so then what that did is it required that all of our construction methodologies had to change as well. Our tools, our safe work environment, everything that was required to be able to go into a process room. We had a room like this. Half of it was for phase A, half of it was for phase B, and there was no physical barrier between phase A and phase B. So they're making product here, and we're still doing construction over here. So it was extremely complicated, and thankfully everybody, now there was a lot of late nights, and there was a lot of cussing, and there was a lot of stomping on the ground, and there was a lot, but thankfully everybody worked really well through that process. I think at the max we had about 400 operatives on site during the peak of COVID, and we were able to kind of sequence folks from a day shift, a night shift, a weekend shift, you know, to try to be able to get the works completed. But when we talk about hazardous area, that was a real issue that we had to deal with in terms of, okay, now we have to have a permit sequence and a permit schedule in place before an operative can walk into the space to do the work that they've got to do, the type of tools that they're using to do that work. And not only that, it was a clean environment. So they had to suit up and wear everything, all the appropriate gear as well. So a lot of learnings for us on that. The equipment specification, the instrument ratings also came into play based on the previous bullet points. But we were dealing with vendors out of Canada, vendors out of the US that, you know, weren't necessarily aligned with the instrument ratings that were going to have to be on their products that they were developing. So HMI screens on down it goes. So there was a lot of engagement there. The COMO requirements, what that meant, what that drove the project, where we were able to cite some of the explosive materials or some of the hazardous areas. You saw the concrete wall around the bulk tank farm. And then, like I said earlier, the CE markings as well. So, you know, you take the engineering and then you localize it, and there was a lot of nuances to the localization. Now, I'm sure you guys have worked in the States and you've worked in other countries across the EU, but from our perspective, those were some of the big challenges that we had on the project, especially within the time frame with which we had to work in, because again, the phase A completion date wasn't moving, so we had to hit those targets. Okay, definitions are extremely important. We all talk English, we all use the same words, but boy, words sure have a whole different meaning. So in our world, when we say design build, we know what that means. I think over here, when you say design build, it has a whole, well, I don't think, I know, at least this project, it has a whole different meaning. So from our perspective, in the States, we use a lot of, Gray use a lot of design build subcontractors, meaning they have engineering resources in-house. So we would develop the design to say 30%, 45%, 60%, depending upon what the deliverable is. And then we hand it off to that subcontractor. That subcontractor takes full responsibility for the completion of that design, and they become the engineer of record of that design. So in our mind, that's what design build is. It's also design completion, right? There's a certain percentage that you know is going to be design completion. It's not designed, it's a white space on the drawing, but you know something's going to go in that white space, a tank, a vessel, a pipe, a hanger, something. So the BOQ model doesn't really work in a design build environment from our perspective, from our definition. So even though we came into the project with a design build attitude and a design assist attitude, and a methodology and a language and a terminology, we realized I remember one meeting with John Paul, and it was a great meeting, and I love John Paul, they're awesome. But I remember I was kind of having a little discussion with Mick Kelly, who great guy, And I was like, Mick, this is design build. He's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean I cover everything that you forgot. I said, well, no. I didn't forget it. We just haven't designed it yet. So it was, there was a lot of conversation around that. But so again, on the BOQ and design development, really trying to understand what was the best design. And once the design got published, and the design was then reviewed, there were modifications and adjustments made based upon, the best practice of what could go in and availability of product, especially in the environment that we were in the environment of COVID, supply chain issues. Sometimes we had to drop back and punt. The BIM management, we're used to BIM management. We do BIM management a lot. But in terms of the way the BIM was managed here and the quantities were extracted and the level of detail, was somewhat surprising. Again, from a design build mentality, we quickly realized that things have to get to the nth degree. We can't work in this kind of vacuous environment. Localization, obviously, and when I say localization, that's really based upon the operation of the facility. So the facility and the concepts were designed based upon US practices, meaning the customer, this is how they do what they do in the States. So then once they started bringing in their local operations team, we quickly realized that the local operations team was going to handle the project and run the facility a little bit differently than the way they're used to doing it in the States. So that brought in another level of, I don't know if complexity is the right word, but definitely another level of hoop to jump through, and especially from an EHS perspective. So once those individuals became engaged on the project and really put their expertise to the design and review of the design and step through it, even though the engineering team, US side, were in alignment with what was being done, when you really got to the local level at the operations level, we had to make some adjustments and some changes there. So, but, everybody worked together on that. And then obviously the local subject matter expertise influences the final output. I mean, everybody knows that, and that was really from engineering to construction, means and methods, ways that we would phase or sequence were a little bit different here. Again, the rigging aspects of how we would look at things. One of the questions that we were asked a lot from our colleagues in the States was safety. Do they build as safe as we do in the States? The perception was that they're kind of cowboys and random and they don't take safety into account. But I've done a lot of foreign direct investment work stateside, and I've sat with many European customers as we're going through the site selection process or conceptual design. And they've always asked me, how do you engineer safety into your projects? How do you engineer safety into your projects? And so we had, the standard answers that we would provide, well, based on building code requirements or legal requirements, we would look at it that way, functionality requirements, operational requirements. Being on this project now, I understand where that question is coming from, because safety is truly at the forefront of all of the design decisions that were made. And I was really impressed by that and the expertise that's shown here on that management. So it's not only on the construction side of how do you manage construction as you're putting work in place, which again was phenomenal, but also how do you make your design decisions and how do you make those engineering solutions that are a safe environment, not just from an engineering perspective, but from an operation perspective as well. So for me, those were a lot of the key, I guess, differences that we experienced in the process. I've talked about COVID. So, when you look at the additional challenges, we were awarded the project in December of 19, had the kickoff meeting in January of 20. COVID hit in March. I didn't put the date on here, but we had to make product in October. And we didn't have planning. So it's kind of shocking to think what was done in a short period of time. Now there was a lot of decision-making process. There was a lot of fluidity that had to occur concurrently with each other. And, obviously the permissions process in the States. Now, even on a brownfield, but actually a brownfield is much easier, but on a greenfield in the States, we could take a design to 30% complete from a civil site work design package. And when I say civil, that means the dirt package. And we could submit for a grading permit, an earth moving permit, and we could get that within 4 weeks, depending on the jurisdiction that we're in. Then we could come back and follow that up with a foundation permit, and we could get that foundation permit in probably 4 weeks. And then we could follow that up with a shell permit or a structural permit, to be able to build the essence of the building. We could probably get that in 4 weeks. And then once the mechanical electrical design is complete, then we would go for a full permit, and that would probably take another 4 weeks. But the thing is, that's all pulled upstream, if that makes sense. So the design doesn't have to be so far along before you can go submit for permits. Everything gets pulled back up. So that was definitely a challenge that we encountered, and thankfully, due to the expertise of the team members that we had, we were able to hit those targets that we needed to hit. Supply chain, everybody knows about that, the global impacts, sourcing and delivery, the Ireland governmental shutdown. We were deemed an essential project, so that was very helpful. We were one of the few projects, I think, that was still open in the country for a period of time. So that enabled the operatives to continue to come to site. I literally had to write a letter that said, we're essential, and by golly, everybody on this project is an essential worker. And I got stopped by the Garda at several, or whatever they're called, checkpoints. And I was shaking like here's my letter. And then they just wagged me on through. So I was glad about that. So then in budget too, right? So the initial budget was built on, and I apologize, I might be going too long, but the initial budget was built on U.S. cost assumptions. So now that was the customer that looked at it. They had costing solutions that they had put in from various projects that they'd done over the years. So they had a budget in mind when the project was initially announced. And then we came to Ireland, and really what we saw was there was a lot of variances across the disciplines. When I say discipline, that would be mechanical, electrical, concrete, steel, whatever it might be. So there were a lot of different ups and downs. Some things are much cheaper here, and some things are much more expensive here. But then when you overlay COVID on top of that, and you overlay supply chain on top of that, I mean, the escalations were just going through the roof, right? And everybody knows that. So really, it's hard to baseline kind of, the final cost with what we would have expected stateside versus what it was built for here. But at the end of the day, it was built for the budget that they had initially assigned to the value of the project. And then exchange rates and BOQs and unit rates, again, feeds back into that. Exchange rates were pretty dynamic for a period of time as well, just based upon some of the issues that were going on with the supply chain. Okay, the last piece. So relationships are key. So, I just put the core values back up here again, but really it boils down to the trust, the expertise, and the goal alignment. So, we, Gray, had to just earn everybody's trust, right? Because we're an American company coming in. Who are you guys? What makes you think you're better than anybody else? And it was just open and direct communication. And we had to be transparent in all of our interactions. And those had to be based on our core values. And hopefully the team that's here, the partners would agree that, they felt as though it was executed in that way. I don't think we left any rock unturned. I don't think there was any discussion that we didn't have. And luckily we had a customer that's very transparent as well. And so they were very open with us as well. So there was no blinding or shielding from any of the costs, profits, overheads, markups, anything of that nature. Everybody could see as much as they want. The expertise, we had to rely upon the expertise of the team. And thankfully, the team that came together were experts in what they do. And they brought that expertise to them. And like it says, a rising tide lifts all boats. So, I think the quality of the team that came together enabled everybody else to want to perform, right? It was kind of almost a competition to see who could do the best job. And it was great to see. Goal alignment, we only succeed if we all succeed. And we try to maintain that through the whole project, that we want everybody to be successful in the project and no egos. There can't be, I put Mamma Mia up there, there's no egos on the project, right? So, but relationships are key. Business is business, but it comes down to humans interacting with humans, right? And, obviously you have to have the expertise, but you got to build on that trust and you got to move forward with a common goal. So I think that's it. Yep. So that's everything. So.
Well done, Jay.